This year's only for real family, people who actually matter to the James legacy. Marcus raised his champagne glass with that smug smile I knew too well. His eyes swept across the table, landing on our mother Linda, who nodded like he'd just said something profound. He looked at cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone except me. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, frozen. 20 pairs of eyes either looked away or watched me with that uncomfortable pity people wear when they witness something cruel but don't want to get involved. The words landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I set down my fork slowly, carefully, like if I moved too fast, something inside me might break. My hands were steady even though I could feel them wanting to shake. My name is Sophie James. I'm 34 years old. I'm an estate planning attorney in Boston, and I've spent my entire life being the footnote in my family's story. This wasn't the first time I'd been erased at my own family's table. It was just the first time someone said it out loud with such clarity, such casual cruelty, while everyone else pretended not to notice. Marcus is my older brother, the golden child, the heir. 3 years ago, when our father died suddenly, Marcus inherited the construction company. The whole thing, $4 million worth of business, equipment, contracts, reputation, everything Dad built over 30 years. Mom made that decision alone, in the lawyer's office 2 weeks after the funeral. I wasn't even in the room. She told me later, over coffee, like she was mentioning the weather. Marcus understands the business, she said. It's what your father would have wanted. I'd spent 10 years helping Dad with legal contracts, reviewing bids, making sure everything was airtight. I was there late nights when he needed documents drafted. I was there when suppliers threatened to walk. I made sure he never got sued, never missed a filing, never lost a contract to legal technicalities. Marcus showed up to site visits twice a year and complained about the coffee. But he got the company. I got nothing, not even a thank you. I organized Dad's funeral. I wrote the obituary. I contacted every client, every supplier, every employee. I managed the estate paperwork, made sure the business transition was legally sound, filed every form that needed filing. I did all of this while grieving, while my chest felt like it was caving in every time I saw Dad's handwriting on an old contract. Marcus showed up late to the funeral. He took the keys to the office the next day and never once said thank you. Mom told everyone how proud she was of him for stepping up, while I stood in the background, holding the program I designed, printed, and paid for myself. I looked around the New Year's table now, at the faces pretending they hadn't heard what Marcus said. Aunt Carol suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Cousin Jennifer checked her phone. Uncle Paul coughed and reached for more wine. Linda smiled at Marcus like he'd just won an award. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. Calm, controlled. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. The dinner dragged on. People laughed at Marcus's jokes. They asked him about the business, about his plans for expansion, about the new contracts he'd landed, contracts I'd helped Dad negotiate years ago, foundations I'd helped build. No one asked me anything. When dessert was served, I excused myself to get my coat. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to not be in that room anymore. I stood in the hallway, pulling my coat from the closet, when I heard voices from the kitchen. Marcus and Linda. The door was cracked open just enough. "She'll be fine," Marcus said, his voice casual, dismissive. "Sophie always lands on her feet. She doesn't need us." I stopped breathing. Linda's response was quieter, but I heard every word. She never did understand what family really means. I stood there in the hallway, coat in my hands, staring at nothing. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something clearer. A quiet, dangerous clarity that settled into my bones like frost. I put on my coat, buttoned it slowly, and walked to the front door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't thank anyone for dinner. I just left. And as I stepped into the cold January night, I realized something I should have understood years ago. They were right about one thing. I didn't need them. I never did. I woke up in my apartment on New Year's Day, staring at the ceiling. The morning light came through the blinds in thin strips, cutting across the white walls. This place was mine. Modest, tasteful. Nothing like Marcus's inherited colonial estate with its wraparound porch and professionally landscaped yard. But every piece of furniture here, every payment, every decision was mine. I lay there replaying the night before, not crying, just analyzing it with the same precision I used to review contracts. For the first time in my life, I let myself see the full picture. Every birthday they forgot while throwing Marcus surprise parties. Every achievement I mentioned that got a distracted nod while Marcus's mediocre accomplishments earned celebration dinners. Every crisis I managed alone, while he got credit for simply showing up. The bedroom door opened quietly. Daniel came in carrying coffee, the steam rising in the cool morning air. My fiancé, a high school history teacher with kind eyes and endless patience. He sat on the edge of the bed and handed me the mug. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. "You don't owe them anything, Sophie," he said quietly. "You know that, right?" I nodded, but I didn't believe it yet. Not fully. Daniel had witnessed 3 years of this. 3 years of watching my family treat me like furniture, useful but invisible. I could see his patience wearing thin, the way his jaw tightened whenever Marcus's name came up. But he respected my need to process things my own way. I sipped the coffee and thought about my father. Robert James was a complicated man, demanding, traditional, old school in every sense. But he valued competence. He valued results. I'd believed, naively, that my work would eventually earn his recognition. I spent 10 years proving myself. I drafted his contracts, negotiated with difficult vendors, saved the company from 2 potential lawsuits that could have destroyed everything he built. When he died, I didn't expect the company. I understood Marcus was the son, the legacy, the one Dad had groomed since childhood, even though Marcus barely understood the difference between a bid and a contract. But I expected something. Acknowledgement. A letter. Some sign that he'd seen me. That all those late nights and early mornings meant something. There was nothing. Just silence. And then Marcus with the keys, and Mom smiling like everything was exactly as it should be. I got out of bed and pulled on sweatpants. Daniel went to make breakfast. I stood in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror, hair unbrushed, eyes tired. The doorbell rang. I glanced at my phone. 9:47 in the morning on New Year's Day. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing on my doorstep, hands in the pockets of his expensive wool coat, shifting his weight, looking uncomfortable but expectant. My stomach dropped. He hadn't visited my apartment in 2 years. The last time was when he needed to borrow $5,000 for a business investment he never repaid. I'd stopped asking about it after the third excuse. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, and felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. The permission to say no. If you've ever been the invisible one in your family, the one who gives everything and receives nothing, you know this moment. You know the weight of that door between you and the person who's taken you for granted your entire life. I want you here for what happens next, because this is where everything changes. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like the forgotten one, stay with me. Like this video, subscribe, and let's see this through together. I opened the door. Marcus didn't apologize for the previous night. He didn't even reference it. His eyes barely met mine before he started talking. "Sophie, thank God you're home. I need your help. There's a situation with the company." I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "What situation?" "Former employee threatening a lawsuit. Wrongful termination. My lawyer's on vacation until next week, and this guy's lawyer is pushing for a settlement meeting on Monday." He ran his hand through his hair, that gesture he used when he wanted to look stressed and competent at the same time. "I need you to review the file and come to the meeting. It's serious." I waited. He didn't say please. He didn't acknowledge showing up unannounced. He just stood there expecting me to fix his problem. "And you need this for free," I said. Not a question. "Well, yeah, it's family business, Sophie. Dad's company. Our legacy. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked at him with an expression I'd never used before. Complete emotional detachment. Like I was looking at a stranger who'd knocked on the wrong door. I'm not real family, Marcus. You made that clear last night. His face flickered. Confusion first, then dismissal. Come on, Sophie, don't be dramatic. This is serious. I could lose a lot of money if this goes wrong. Daniel appeared behind me in the hallway. I felt his presence, solid and quiet. Marcus glanced at him, then back at me. Can we talk inside? My hand was still on the door. I could feel Daniel waiting, not interfering but ready to support whatever I decided. Marcus shifted his weight again. Sophie, I need an answer. Are you going to help me or not? I stood there, looking at my brother, at the man who'd inherited everything while I got nothing, who'd just told a room full of people I didn't matter, who now stood on my doorstep demanding free legal work like it was owed to him. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely no obligation to say yes. I let Marcus inside, not because I was going to help him, not because I felt sorry for him. I let him in because I wanted to see how far his entitlement went, how completely he failed to see his own hypocrisy. He walked past me into the living room like he owned the place. He sat on my couch and put his expensive shoes on my coffee table without asking. Then he started explaining the situation with that casual expectation of someone who's never been refused anything in his life. The guy's name is Carlos Martinez, project manager. Worked for Dad for 8 years, worked for me for 3. I had to let him go last month because he was causing problems, questioning my decisions, undermining my authority with the crew. I sat in the chair across from him. What decisions was he questioning? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Materials choices on the Riverside contract. He wanted to use more expensive suppliers, said the ones I picked weren't up to standard, but I'm running a business, Sophie. I have to watch costs. Dad understood that. My professional mind engaged automatically, even though I didn't want it to. What materials specifically? Structural lumber, some concrete. Look, it all meets code. Carlos just has this old school mentality like Dad did, wants to overbuild everything. That's not how you stay competitive. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just a wrongful termination case. This was potentially fraud. If Carlos could prove Marcus knowingly used inferior materials while billing clients for premium quality, the company could face criminal charges, not just a lawsuit. Criminal charges. My father built that company on reputation. 30 years of honest work, of delivering quality, of standing behind every project. Marcus was destroying it through incompetence and greed. Does Carlos have documentation? I asked. Marcus shifted. Some emails, purchase orders, nothing that proves anything. Nothing that proves anything, or nothing that proves what you want it to prove? His face hardened. Whose side are you on here? I'm on the side of understanding what I'm dealing with before I get involved. He leaned forward, and his tone shifted. Softer now. Manipulative. Dad would want you to help Sophie. He'd want you to protect the family legacy. This company was his life. You know that. The invocation of our father was calculated. Marcus knew my guilt, my eternal need for posthumous approval, that deep, desperate hope that somehow, somewhere, Dad was watching and might finally be proud of me. But something had shifted since last night. I heard the manipulation clearly now, like a language I suddenly understood. I was 12 years old when I won the regional academic decathlon. Marcus was 16 when he made varsity football. Our parents went to his game. They forgot my award ceremony entirely. I came home with my trophy, still wearing the medal around my neck, and found them in the kitchen discussing Marcus's touchdown. Linda glanced at my trophy and said, "That's nice, honey," then turned back to Marcus and asked if the scout from Boston College had been there. That trophy is still in a box in my closet. I've never displayed it. I looked at Marcus now, sitting on my couch, asking me to save him from his own mistakes. I'll review the case files, I said, but I need full access to company records, financial statements, purchase orders, contracts, everything. And I need complete honesty about the situation. He agreed too quickly. Yeah, of course, I'll send everything by email today, which told me he was hiding more than he'd admitted. He stood to leave, clearly relieved this had been easier than expected. At the door, he paused and said, almost as an afterthought, Mom was asking about you this morning. She felt bad about last night. It was a lie. I could tell by the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the way his hand was already reaching for the doorknob. But it revealed something important. Linda knew the comment had hurt. She knew, and she'd sent Marcus to smooth it over without actually apologizing herself. I closed the door behind him and stood there for a moment. Daniel emerged from the bedroom where he'd been deliberately staying out of sight. He looked at me with concern and frustration mixed together. You're not actually helping him, are you? I didn't answer immediately. I was thinking, calculating. Daniel knew that look. He'd seen it before when I was working through a complex case. Sophie, he's using you. Again. I turned to him and said something that surprised us both. I know, but this time I'm going to let him. The statement hung in the air between us. Daniel stared at me, trying to understand what I meant. I walked to the dining table and opened my laptop. I began researching Massachusetts. Construction law, wrongful termination statutes, fraud penalties, breach of contract, criminal liability for construction defects. But I wasn't researching how to defend Marcus. I was researching how to understand the full scope of his liability, every possible consequence, every legal exposure, every way this could destroy him. Because I'd spent 34 years being the family's unpaid lawyer, therapist, and scapegoat. Maybe it was time to be something else. Maybe it was time to be the one who remembered everything. The email arrived at 3 o'clock on New Year's Day. Marcus had dumped everything into a shared folder. Contracts, emails, financial records, all of it disorganized and unexplained. No notes, no context, just a mess for someone else to sort through. Typical Marcus. He expected me to do the actual work while he took the credit. I spent the afternoon going through it all, and what I found was worse than I'd expected. Much worse. Carlos's allegations were completely accurate. I found email chains where Marcus explicitly instructed suppliers to provide cheaper materials, while billing clients for premium specifications. The language was clear, deliberate, there was no misunderstanding, no gray area. And the savings didn't go back into the company. They went directly into Marcus's personal account. This wasn't just wrongful termination. This was systematic fraud spanning 18 months and at least 7 major contracts. I kept digging. The financial records showed Marcus had been draining the company's operating capital for personal expenses, luxury car leases, country club memberships, a beach house rental in Cape Cod that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. The company my father built with 30 years of careful management was hemorrhaging money. Marcus had been covering the shortfalls by cutting corners on jobs and delaying vendor payments. Some suppliers hadn't been paid in 4 months. Then I found something that made my stomach turn. Marcus had taken out a business loan for $800,000 using the company as collateral. The loan documents were buried in a subfolder marked Expansion. The board approval signature page showed 3 names: Marcus, Linda, and Gerald Foster, Dad's old friend who'd been on the board since the beginning, and rubber-stamped everything Marcus wanted. The loan document said the money was for commercial expansion into the South Shore market. But that's not where the money went. I found statements from an online poker site, losses exceeding $600,000 over 2 years. Marcus had used the company loan to cover his gambling debts. I sat back from my laptop and stared at the screen. As an attorney, I had a problem now. A serious one. This information had been provided to me under implied attorney-client privilege, even without a formal agreement. I couldn't simply turn it over to Carlos or the authorities. But I also couldn't participate in covering up fraud. I was bound by professional ethics, but morally repulsed by the idea of protecting my brother's crimes. I did something Marcus hadn't asked for. I investigated Carlos Martinez himself. It took me an hour to piece together his background. 20 years of construction management experience, 3 kids, a spotless professional record, recommendations from every previous employer. He hadn't threatened a lawsuit out of malice or greed. He'd done it because Marcus fired him the day before Christmas for refusing to falsify inspection reports. Carlos needed his job back, and he deserved justice. My phone rang at 7 that evening, Linda's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Sophie, honey?" Her tone was artificially sweet, the voice she used when she wanted something. "Marcus mentioned you're helping with that unfortunate situation. I'm so proud of you for supporting your brother." No apology for New Year's Eve. No acknowledgement of the hurt. Just an immediate pivot to praising me for serving the family. My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm reviewing the case," I said. Neutral, giving nothing away. "Your father would be so grateful you're protecting his legacy. You know how much the company meant to him. It was his whole life, Sophie, everything he worked for." The same button Marcus had pushed. But coming from Linda, it carried different weight. She was using Dad's memory as a weapon, just like Marcus had. And I realized they'd coordinated this approach. Marcus had identified my vulnerability, and Linda was exploiting it. The teamwork they'd never shown me as a child was now deployed against me. "I'll do what's right," I said. "Of course you will, sweetheart. You always do. That's why we can count on you." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my dark living room, the laptop screen glowing with evidence of my brother's crimes. I thought about my father, about the company he built, about the legacy Linda claimed to care about. Marcus wasn't protecting that legacy. He was destroying it. And Linda was enabling him, just as she always had. Because acknowledging Marcus's failures would mean admitting she'd chosen wrong, that she'd given everything to the wrong child. That realization settled over me like cold water. She would never admit it. Never. She would sacrifice the company, the family reputation, even me, before she'd admit Marcus wasn't the golden child she'd believed him to be. Daniel came into the room and turned on a lamp. The sudden light made me blink. "You've been sitting in the dark for an hour," he said quietly. "I know." "What did you find?" "Everything. Worse than I thought." He sat down next to me. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the laptop screen, at the evidence, at the timeline of Marcus's fraud and Linda's willful blindness. I opened a new document and began typing. Not a legal defense strategy. Something else. A timeline. Every instance of favoritism. Every financial transaction. Every lie. I was building a case, but not the one Marcus expected. Daniel watched me work. "Sophie?" "They wanted me to save him," I said, my fingers moving across the keyboard. "They always did. Clean up his messes, make his problems disappear, sacrifice myself so he could keep pretending to be something he's not. And you can't save someone who's drowning if they're determined to pull you under with them." I kept typing, document after document, evidence after evidence. So I decided to do something I'd never done before. I looked at Daniel, and he saw something in my face that made him go very still. I decided to save myself instead. The text came from my cousin Emma at 8 in the morning. "Coffee tomorrow? Need to talk about something." Emma was Linda's niece, 31, worked in accounting. She'd always been neutral territory in family dynamics. Not close to me, but not part of the Marcus and Linda alliance either. I texted back, "Sure. Where?" We met at a quiet cafe in Cambridge the next afternoon. Emma was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a latte she hadn't touched. She looked nervous. Her hands kept moving to the cup, stirring it, then pulling away. I sat down and ordered coffee. We started with small talk. Her job, her recent breakup with a guy who couldn't commit, the weather. But I could tell she was building to something. The way her eyes kept darting to mine and then away. Finally, she took a breath and said, "I need to tell you something about the company, about what Marcus has been doing." My coffee arrived. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and waited. "I was hired 6 months ago to do some contract accounting work. Marcus called me directly, didn't go through Mom or Aunt Linda. He said he needed someone to organize the books, that things had gotten messy after your dad died, and he wanted to clean everything up before the annual audit." She paused, stirred her latte again. "I thought it was routine, financial housekeeping." I needed the work and he was paying well, so I said yes. What did you find? I asked. Emma's voice dropped lower. Systematic embezzlement. Marcus has been creating fake vendor invoices and paying them to shell companies he controls. I traced 4 different entities, all registered to addresses that don't exist or lead back to P.O. boxes he rents. She pulled out her phone and showed me a spreadsheet. Numbers in red, dates, amounts. I estimate he's stolen nearly $400,000 from the company over the past 2 years. That's in addition to whatever else he's been doing. I stared at the numbers on her screen. $400,000. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Not accusing, just asking. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I confronted him, told him I couldn't be part of this, that I was going to have to report it. He looked at me like I was stupid and said if I told anyone, he'd say I was the one stealing. He showed me documents he'd created, invoices, with my digital signature forged on them, emails that looked like they came from my account. She wiped her eyes quickly. My parents are getting older. They depend on my income for medical bills, for everything. If Marcus accused me of embezzlement, even if it was false, it would destroy my accounting career. No firm would touch me. I couldn't risk it. Her voice cracked. So I finished the project. I organized his books the way he wanted, and I've been carrying this guilt ever since. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I understand. And I did. I understood fear of family retaliation more than most people ever would. What changed? I asked. I heard about Carlos's lawsuit through family gossip. Mom mentioned it at dinner last week, said Marcus was dealing with some disgruntled employee trying to shake him down. Emma's jaw tightened. I realized Marcus would probably try to blame the financial irregularities on Carlos or other employees if the case went to court. He'd throw innocent people under the bus to save himself. She pulled a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. I couldn't let that happen. Everything's on here. The fake invoices, the shell companies, the money trail, all of it. I looked at the small black drive sitting between us. I know I should have said something sooner, Emma said, but I was scared. I still am. Does anyone else know you have this? She shook her head. Just you? You're the only one in the family who might actually care about what's right instead of what's convenient. I picked up the USB drive. It was so small, so light, but it felt heavy in my hand. I now had complete documentation of Marcus's fraud, his embezzlement, his manipulation. I had the power to destroy him professionally, possibly send him to prison. The question wasn't whether I had the evidence. It was what I was willing to do with it. Emma grabbed my hand before I could put the drive in my purse. Be careful, Sophie. Linda will protect Marcus no matter what. She always has. If you go against him, you'll be going against her too. She looked at me with something like pity. Are you ready for that? I didn't answer immediately. Was I ready to lose my mother? Or rather, was I ready to acknowledge I'd never really had her in the first place? Have you ever held proof of someone's betrayal in your hand and had to decide what kind of person you're going to be, not what's legal or ethical? Those answers were clear, but what you're willing to sacrifice to do the right thing. Because sometimes the right thing costs you the only family you have, even if that family never really wanted you in the first place. I'd love to know what you would do in this situation. Drop a comment and tell me. Would you use the evidence or would you walk away? I drove home in silence. The USB drive sat in my purse on the passenger seat. I thought about my father, about whether he'd known what Marcus was doing before he died. Had he seen the signs and ignored them? Or had Marcus waited until Dad was gone to start stealing? I thought about Linda's deliberate blindness, her willingness to sacrifice my dignity, my worth, my entire existence to maintain Marcus's image. I thought about Carlos and his 3 kids, about Emma's fear, about all the people Marcus had hurt because no one had ever held him accountable. When I got home, Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner, pasta, from the smell of it. He took one look at my face and knew something had shifted. What happened? He asked. I set my purse on the counter. The USB drive was visible inside, small and black against the lining. I found out exactly who my brother is, I said. Daniel looked at the drive, then back at me. And now I have to decide who I'm going to be. I didn't elaborate, but he saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen before. Something harder. Something that looked like the beginning of war. I spent the next 3 days in careful, methodical research. I didn't tell Marcus I had additional evidence. I didn't confront Linda. I responded to Marcus's texts with brief, professional updates. Reviewing the case. Need more time. We'll have assessment soon. My silence made him comfortable, and comfortable people make mistakes. I scheduled a confidential meeting with a criminal defense attorney I knew from law school, Rebecca Chen. She'd gone into white-collar crime defense and had a reputation for being brilliant and discreet. I framed it as a hypothetical case for a potential client. I laid out the facts without names, without identifying details. Rebecca listened, taking notes, her face growing more serious as I talked. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me. Your hypothetical client is looking at multiple felonies, fraud, embezzlement, falsifying business records. If this is construction related in Massachusetts, the penalties are severe. We're talking 5 to 10 years in prison, full restitution, and permanent loss of business licenses. What if he claims ignorance? Says he didn't know what he was doing was illegal? Rebecca shook her head. With this level of documentation, creating shell companies, forging invoices, threatening witnesses, that shows intent. No prosecutor would buy an ignorance defense. I thanked her and left. That night, I sat at my dining table surrounded by documents and legal pads covered in notes. I was trying to work through the moral calculation. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about justice and protection. If I did nothing, Marcus would continue destroying our father's company. He'd keep hurting innocent people. Carlos would lose his lawsuit because Marcus would bury him in legal fees and false testimony. Emma would live in fear of exposure. Other employees would be scapegoated. Eventually, the company would collapse under the weight of Marcus's fraud and mismanagement. Jobs would be lost. Reputations destroyed. Everything Dad built, gone. I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel. It was 2 a.m. He sat down across from me and looked at the papers spread across the table. I need you to know something, he said quietly. Whatever you decide, I support you. If you want to walk away from all of this, from Marcus, from your mother, from the whole toxic mess, I'll help you build a life that has nothing to do with them. He paused. But if you're planning what I think you're planning, I support that too. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was offering me unconditional support, something I'd never had from my family of origin. He saw me clearly, not as an extension of the James family legacy, not as the invisible daughter, but as Sophie, myself, complete. The realization was profound and painful. I'd been seeking from Marcus and Linda what they were constitutionally incapable of giving. My phone rang. Linda, I answered. Marcus says you're taking a long time with this case. Her voice had an edge. He needs an answer, Sophie. This is family business. It should be your priority. I kept my voice calm. I'm being thorough. Dad always valued thoroughness. The invocation of our father silenced her for a moment. I'll have a complete assessment by the end of the week, I said. She hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus started texting multiple times daily after that, his messages growing more demanding. Need update. Carlos's lawyer is pushing. Mom says you're stalling. I didn't respond to the pressure. I'd learned from years of legal practice that urgency is often manufactured by people who have something to hide. I let him sweat. On Thursday, I made an unannounced visit to the company offices, my first time there since Dad's funeral. The receptionist looked surprised to see me, a young woman, maybe 25, who clearly didn't know who I was. I'm Sophie James, I said, Robert's daughter. I need to see the employee files for a legal matter. She looked uncertain. I should probably call Marcus. Please do. She picked up the phone. I heard her explain the situation. Then she hung up and said, He says it's fine. The files are in the back office. Marcus had authorized it immediately, too focused on getting my help to question why I needed employee records. I spent an hour going through the files. I found a pattern. Marcus had fired or forced out every employee who'd questioned his decisions over the past 3 years. 12 people total, all with exemplary records under Dad's management. Some had left with severance agreements that included non-disparagement clauses. Marcus had essentially bought their silence. Carlos was the first to refuse the payoff and fight back. I photographed every relevant document with my phone, every termination letter, every severance agreement, every performance review that showed competent employees suddenly marked as problematic after questioning Marcus. I returned the files, thanked the receptionist, and left. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd uncovered. My brother wasn't just incompetent. He wasn't just greedy. He was systematically dismantling everything our father built. And he was doing it with our mother's blessing, with her active protection, while she praised him for carrying on the family legacy. I started the car but didn't drive yet. I realized then that saving the company meant destroying my brother, and I had to decide if I was okay with that. I drafted 2 documents. The first was the legal defense strategy Marcus expected, a comprehensive brief outlining how to defend against Carlos's lawsuit through settlement and non-disclosure agreements. It was competent, professional, and would likely make the immediate problem disappear. The second document was something else entirely, a detailed report of all financial irregularities, fraud, and embezzlement, organized chronologically with supporting evidence. I sat looking at both documents on my screen, understanding what they represented. The ethical complexity of my situation was real. I'd obtained the original documents from Marcus under implied attorney-client privilege, even without a formal engagement letter. But Emma's evidence had been provided independently, and the crime-fraud exception to attorney-client privilege meant I wasn't obligated to protect information about ongoing crimes. Legally, I was on solid ground. Emotionally, the terrain was treacherous. I reached out to Carlos's attorney. I introduced myself as an estate planning lawyer who had information relevant to the case. I didn't mention my relationship to Marcus. I arranged a meeting for the next day. I brought only Emma's evidence, not the documents Marcus had provided. This distinction was crucial. I wasn't violating privilege. I was acting as a third-party witness to fraud. Carlos's attorney worked out of a small office in Somerville. Her name was Patricia Reeves. She'd agreed to meet with Carlos present. When I walked in, Carlos stood up from his chair. He was 52, graying at the temples, with tired eyes and calloused hands. We sat down. I explained who I was, what I had, and how I'd obtained it. Patricia reviewed Emma's evidence carefully, her expression growing more focused with each page. Carlos watched me with something like confusion. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't know me." "I know you were right to refuse falsifying inspection reports," I said. "I know you were fired the day before Christmas for doing the right thing." His eyes filled with tears. He looked away quickly. "My wife works 2 jobs now," he said quietly, "covering the mortgage while I look for work. My daughter had to drop out of college. We can't afford tuition anymore." He wiped his eyes. "I don't want to destroy the company. I just want my job back. I want someone to acknowledge that I was right." He looked at me directly. "Your father was a good man. He built something real. I don't know what happened after he died." I took a breath. "Robert James was my father," I said. Carlos's face went through a series of changes. Shock, understanding, then pity, the same pity I'd seen at the New Year's dinner. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know Robert had a daughter working in law. He talked about his son taking over, but he never mentioned—" He trailed off, realizing the painful implication. Even my father, in his way, had rendered me invisible. Patricia spoke up. "This evidence changes everything. We're not just talking about wrongful termination anymore. This is criminal fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement." She looked at me. "Are you willing to testify if subpoenaed?" "Yes," I said. "And your cousin, Emma?" "I'll talk to her. I believe she will." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then we have a case that goes far beyond civil court." I left the meeting feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. I'd made my decision. I would not defend Marcus. I would not help him escape consequences. But I also wouldn't actively prosecute him. That wasn't my role. Instead, I would step aside and let the justice system function as it should. I would provide truthful testimony if required. I would ensure Emma was protected. And I would let Marcus face what he'd created. I scheduled a meeting with Marcus at a neutral location, a conference room at a business center downtown. Not my home, not the company office. I brought the first document, the defense strategy, in a professional folder. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late. He didn't apologize. He walked in, threw his coat over a chair, and said, "So, can you fix this?" I slid the folder across the table. He opened it and flipped through the pages, nodding, approving. "This is good. This works. When can you file the response?" I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "I'm not filing anything, Marcus. I'm not taking your case." His head snapped up. Confusion and anger mixed on his face. "What do you mean? You said you'd help." "I said I'd review the case. I did. I reviewed everything. The case files, the financial records, the employee history." I paused. "I can't represent you because there's no ethical defense for what you've done. Carlos's allegations are true. You committed fraud. You've been embezzling from the company. You've destroyed what Dad built." Marcus's face cycled through emotions. Shock, denial, anger, then calculation. "You can't prove any of that," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I didn't argue. I simply stood to leave. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just telling you I won't help you hide it anymore." I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. Marcus's voice followed me. "Mom is going to hear about this. You're done in this family." I stopped, turned back. For the first time in my life, I looked at my brother with complete emotional detachment. "I was done in this family the day I was born, Marcus. I just didn't realize it until now." I walked out, leaving him sitting in the conference room with his defense strategy, a roadmap he couldn't use without a lawyer willing to implement it. My phone rang before I reached my car. Linda. I looked at her name on the screen, and I sent it to voicemail. My phone exploded with messages from Linda, texts, voicemails, missed calls, 23 in the first hour. I watched them come in, one after another, and read each one with clinical detachment. "Marcus said you refused to help? Call me immediately. We need to talk about this. How dare you abandon your family? Your father would be so disappointed in you." I watched the pattern I'd seen my entire life play out in digital form. Confusion, anger, manipulation, guilt. Finally, I answered. Linda didn't wait for a greeting. "What is wrong with you? Your brother needs help and you just walk away? After everything this family has done for you?" I let the question hang in the air, waiting to see if she heard the irony. She didn't. "What has this family done for me, Mom?" I asked quietly. She launched into a familiar litany. They raised me, fed me, put me through college. She ignored that I'd paid my own way through scholarships and work study. They included me in family events. She ignored that I was consistently marginalized at those events. They gave me opportunities. She ignored that every opportunity went to Marcus first, better, and with celebration. For the first time in my life, I interrupted her. "I'm not having this conversation. Marcus committed crimes. I'm not helping him cover them up. That's not negotiable." Her voice rose. "Crimes? He made some business mistakes. That's what you do in a family. You protect each other." My response came out like ice. "No, Mom. What you do is enable Marcus while pretending I don't exist. I'm done participating in that." Silence on the other end. Then she played her final card. "If you don't help your brother, you're not welcome in this family anymore. I mean it, Sophie. You'll be cut off completely." I felt the threat land, but not the way she intended. Instead of fear, I felt liberation. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the air between us. Linda had been expecting argument, pleading, maybe tears. "Okay? That's all you have to say?" I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "I've been cut off my entire life, Mom. You just never made it official before." At least now I don't have to pretend anymore. She sputtered, trying to regain control. You're being dramatic. You've always been so sensitive. I recognized the gaslighting immediately, the same tactic used every time I'd expressed hurt or need. I said something I'd rehearsed mentally for years, but never had the courage to speak. I love you, Mom. I probably always will, but I don't like who I become when I'm trying to earn love from someone who's never going to give it. I'm done trying. I paused. I hope you and Marcus figure out the legal situation, but you'll do it without me. I hung up before she could respond. I sat in my car in the parking garage, phone in my lap, and waited for the emotional collapse I expected. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange lightness, like I'd been carrying weight I didn't realize was there. My phone buzzed. Daniel. How did it go? I typed back. I think I just disowned my mother. His reply was immediate. Proud of you. Come home. Over the next 24 hours, I received messages from various family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all clearly prompted by Linda. The messages followed a pattern, expressing disappointment, urging me to reconsider, emphasizing family unity. I recognized the coordinated campaign. I responded to none of them. I watched the James family close ranks around Marcus, just as they always had. Emma called, her voice anxious. I heard Linda called you. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. She hesitated. My mom called too. Linda's telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're not thinking clearly. I laughed. Actually laughed at the predictability. Of course she is. That's easier than admitting Marcus is a criminal. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised me. Several family members have reached out to me privately, expressing doubt about Marcus's innocence. They can't say so publicly without risking Linda's wrath, but they're not as united as she thinks. I sat up straighter. Really? Yeah, people have noticed things. Marcus's expensive lifestyle, the company's problems, how he treats employees. Your refusal to defend him has planted seeds of doubt. I hadn't expected that. I thought walking away would mean complete isolation. Instead, it had given others permission to question what they'd been too afraid to question before. 2 days after my conversation with Linda, I received a formal email. It was from Patricia Reeves, Carlos's attorney. She'd filed an expanded lawsuit including fraud charges and was requesting a full company audit. Marcus was named personally, as was the company. Linda was copied on the email as a company board member. I read it twice, feeling something settle in my chest. I didn't file the charges. I didn't hire the attorney. I just stopped protecting Marcus from the consequences of his own actions. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply get out of the way and let the truth do its work. Marcus hired a new attorney after I refused to represent him. The attorney filed a response denying all allegations. But the court ordered a full financial audit of the company anyway. The auditor was appointed by the court, not chosen by Marcus, which meant he couldn't manipulate the findings. The audit would take approximately 6 weeks. Marcus was ordered to preserve all company documents and provide full access to financial records. Emma told me Marcus was losing it. He was calling emergency family meetings, trying to prep employees on what to say, consulting with multiple attorneys who all kept telling him the same thing. The evidence was damning. He tried to contact me 17 times. I blocked his number. He showed up at my apartment building one evening. I watched him through the peephole, standing in the hallway, knocking. I didn't answer the door. Linda escalated her campaign against me. She told family members I'd betrayed them, that I was working with the enemy, that I was trying to destroy the family business out of jealousy. The narrative she constructed was elaborate. Sophie was always resentful of Marcus, always jealous of his success. She was using this lawsuit as revenge for imagined slights. But Linda's narrative had a problem. The audit was independent and thorough. Within 3 weeks, preliminary findings confirmed everything Carlos had alleged, and more. The auditor discovered the shell companies, the fake invoices, the material substitutions, the personal expenditures disguised as business expenses. The numbers were worse than even Emma had known. Marcus had misappropriated over $1.2 million in 3 years. Linda called an emergency board meeting. Herself, Marcus, and Gerald Foster, the family friend who served as the third board member. Emma was asked to attend to explain the financial findings. She called me beforehand, terrified. "What do I say?" she asked. "Tell the truth. Show the numbers. You're the accountant. You report facts, not opinions." Emma presented the audit findings with shaking hands, but clear voice. She showed the timeline of financial deterioration, the pattern of fraud, the systematic theft. Linda interrupted repeatedly, trying to discredit the findings, trying to blame external factors, market conditions, anything but Marcus. Gerald sat in increasingly horrified silence. He'd worked with my father for 30 years. He'd been a passive board member, rubber stamping whatever Linda and Marcus wanted. But now he spoke. "Robert built this company over 30 years. He trusted us to protect it. This," he gestured at the audit report, "this is a betrayal of everything he worked for." Linda tried to redirect. "We can fix this. Marcus made mistakes, but we can restructure, bring in consultants." Gerald cut her off. "These aren't mistakes, Linda. This is theft." He made a motion. Marcus must be removed as CEO immediately, pending the outcome of the legal case. Linda refused to second the motion. Under the company bylaws, a majority vote was required. It was a deadlock. Gerald for removal, Linda against, Marcus against. Marcus shouldn't have been voting on his own removal, but he did anyway. The company remained in Marcus's control. Gerald resigned from the board effective immediately. The next day, Gerald stopped by my office. I was surprised to see him. He was carrying a box of old files. "Your father kept meticulous records," he said. "I think you should have these." He set the box on my desk. "He talked about you more than you know. He was proud of your legal career, even if he didn't know how to say it." The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples I hadn't expected. After Gerald left, I opened the box. Inside were my father's personal notes, observations about the business, concerns about various projects, and notes about Marcus. One note, dated 6 months before my father died, made me stop breathing. "Marcus isn't ready. Maybe Sophie should be involved in transition. Need to talk to Linda." The conversation apparently never happened. My father died before he could correct his mistake. What do you do when you discover that the parent who overlooked you actually saw you all along, but died before they could tell you? When you realize the future you deserved was stolen not by malice, but by timing? I sat there holding my father's notes, reading his doubts about Marcus, his thoughts about my involvement, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, but grief. Grief for the conversation we never had, the acknowledgement I never received, the relationship we could have built if he'd lived another year. Have you ever discovered something too late to change anything? A truth that makes everything make sense but comes when it can't help anymore? 2 weeks later, Patricia called me. "Based on the audit findings, I'm making a criminal referral to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office." My breath caught. This is no longer just civil litigation. Marcus could face felony charges, and Linda could potentially be charged as an accessory if the investigation shows she knew about the fraud and failed to act. The weight of that settled over me slowly. An investigator from the AG's office contacted me the following week. She wanted a statement. We met at her office in Boston, a small room with a table and recording equipment. I provided my statement carefully, distinguishing between what I'd learned from Marcus, which was privileged, and what I'd learned from Emma and the audit, which wasn't. I testified truthfully about the company's history, my father's management practices, the deterioration under Marcus's leadership. I didn't embellish, I didn't editorialize. I simply told the truth. The investigator took notes, asked clarifying questions, recorded everything. Then she asked me a direct question. "In your professional opinion, did your brother know what he was doing was illegal?" I paused, considering my answer carefully. I thought about Marcus's intelligence, his business degree from a good school, his years working under our father. "Yes," I said finally. "He knew." The investigator nodded and closed her notebook. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. James. We'll be in touch. I left the interview and sat in my car for a long time. I just sealed my brother's fate, and I felt nothing but a strange, hollow peace. News of the criminal investigation spread through the family within hours. My phone filled with messages, some supportive, most accusatory. My uncle, Linda's brother, left a voicemail calling me a traitor to the family. Name. My aunt, my father's sister, sent a text. Your father would be ashamed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who'd ignored me for decades suddenly cared deeply about my actions. But not everyone condemned me. Emma's mother called to thank me for protecting her daughter from Marcus's threats. Two of my cousins reached out privately to express support. They admitted they'd always found Marcus insufferable, and Linda's favoritism obvious. Gerald sent a brief email. You did the right thing. Robert would be proud. The support was unexpected and deeply meaningful. Marcus made one final attempt at manipulation. He sent me a letter, not an email, a handwritten letter. He claimed he was suicidal, that I destroyed his life, that he couldn't survive prison. The letter was calculated to trigger guilt. It referenced our childhood, our father's death, family loyalty. I recognized the manipulation immediately. Marcus had never been suicidal. He'd been entitled. This was his last attempt to control me through emotion. I didn't respond to Marcus directly. I forwarded the letter to his attorney with a note. Your client sent me this. If you believe he's genuinely at risk, please ensure he receives appropriate mental health support. I will not be responding to him directly. Clinical, professional, maintaining the boundary I'd established. I wasn't responsible for managing Marcus's emotions or consequences. Linda made one last attempt to reach me. She appeared unannounced at my office. My assistant tried to turn her away, but Linda pushed past and entered my office. I was in the middle of a client meeting. We need to talk, Linda demanded. I excused myself and faced her in the lobby. You need to leave or I'll call security. Linda didn't lower her voice. She was desperate and furious. You've destroyed this family. You've destroyed your brother's life, all because you've always been jealous of him, always wanted what he had. I remained calm, aware that my colleagues could hear everything. I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just stopped protecting Marcus from the consequences of his own choices. Her voice cracked. Your father would be devastated. He trusted Marcus with his legacy, and you're letting it be destroyed. I felt the old guilt reflex activate, but it didn't take hold. Dad's legacy was honesty and quality work. Marcus destroyed that. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. Linda's face contorted with rage and something else. Fear, perhaps, that she'd backed the wrong son. My managing partner appeared, having heard the commotion. Mrs. James, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a place of business. Linda looked around, realizing she'd made a scene in front of my professional community. Her final words before security escorted her out. You're dead to me. You understand that? Dead to me. My response was barely audible. I've been dead to you my whole life, Mom. This is just the funeral. I returned to my office, closed the door, and allowed myself to shake. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later. My assistant had called him. He found me sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. She said I'm dead to her, I told him. Daniel knelt beside my chair. Then you're free. The statement was simple, true, and devastating. My managing partner called me in the next day. I expected reprimand for the scene Linda had caused. Instead, he said, I looked into the situation, what you did, refusing to help cover up fraud, cooperating with the investigation. That's exactly the kind of ethical integrity this firm values. You handled a terrible situation with professionalism. Well done. The professional validation I received from my firm stood in stark contrast to my family's condemnation. Recognition of my integrity and judgment from people who actually saw me clearly. I realized I'd been seeking approval from the wrong people my entire life. The people who valued me for who I was weren't the ones who shared my blood. Patricia called me a few days later. The AG's office is moving forward with criminal charges. They're offering Marcus a plea deal, Full restitution, 3 years in prison, permanent ban from serving as a corporate officer. He has 1 week to accept. If he doesn't, they'll proceed with a trial on more serious charges. I took a breath. What about Carlos? Patricia's voice softened. We're negotiating his reinstatement and back pay as part of the settlement. You helped make that possible. I hung up and sat very still. I didn't just refuse to protect Marcus. I helped give Carlos his life back. Marcus's attorney contacted the AG's office requesting a meeting to discuss the plea offer. Marcus was facing multiple felony counts: fraud, embezzlement, falsifying business records, and tax evasion. The IRS had joined the investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. A trial would likely result in a longer sentence and complete financial ruin. The plea deal, while devastating, was his least worst option. The AG's office agreed to modify the plea slightly: 2 years in minimum security prison, 5 years probation, full restitution of $1.2 million, permanent ban from serving as a corporate officer, mandatory cooperation with any ongoing investigations. Marcus would also have to surrender his ownership stake in the company. It was a deal that acknowledged his cooperation while still holding him accountable. Linda mortgaged her house to hire an expensive criminal defense attorney to fight the charges. The attorney reviewed the evidence and told her the same thing Marcus's attorney had said. The case was unwinnable. The audit trail was too clear. The documentation too thorough. Fighting would only make things worse. Linda refused to believe it. She was convinced I'd somehow fabricated evidence or manipulated the system. With Marcus's removal now certain, the board had to decide the company's future. Linda wanted to sell immediately, liquidate assets, pay Marcus's restitution from the proceeds. Gerald, who'd returned to the board specifically to prevent this, argued for restructuring under new management, preserving jobs, preserving my father's legacy. The third board seat, Marcus's, was now vacant and had to be filled. Gerald called me with a proposal. The board wants to offer you the vacant seat and, eventually, the CEO position. Your father's company needs someone who understands both the legal and operational sides, someone who actually cares about the legacy, not just the money. That's you, Sophie. I was stunned. The position I was never considered for. The role I was deemed unworthy of, now being offered. My first instinct was refusal. The company represented years of pain, invisibility, rejection. Taking the role would mean constant interaction with Linda, who remained on the board as majority shareholder. It would mean inheriting the mess Marcus created. It would mean rebuilding something that had been used as a weapon against my self-worth. Daniel listened to my concerns and offered a different view. What if this isn't about them anymore? What if this is about you building something that actually reflects your father's values? Not for Linda's approval or Marcus's redemption, but because you're the only one who can do it right? I considered this reframing, not as reconciliation with my family, but as honoring my father's actual legacy. I called Gerald back. I'll consider the position under one condition. Linda must resign from the board. Gerald was silent for a long moment. That's going to be nearly impossible. She's majority shareholder. We can't force her out. My response was firm. Then I can't take the position. I won't spend the next decade fighting her at every board meeting. If you want me to save the company, Linda has to go. Gerald called an emergency shareholder meeting. In addition to Linda's majority stake, there were minority shareholders, employees who'd been given small equity stakes by my father over the years. Gerald presented the situation. The company was facing bankruptcy due to Marcus's fraud and Linda's mismanagement. The only path forward was professional leadership, my leadership. But I wouldn't accept the position while Linda remained on the board. The minority shareholders, led by Carlos, who'd retained his small equity stake even after being fired, voted unanimously to request Linda's resignation. Combined with Gerald's vote, it wasn't enough to force her out. But it was a clear vote of no confidence. The message was unmistakable. The people who actually worked at the company wanted Linda gone. Linda faced an impossible position. She could refuse to resign, but then I wouldn't take over and the company would likely fail completely. leaving her with worthless shares and Marcus's restitution debt. Or she could resign, preserve the company's value, and potentially recover some financial stability, but lose all control and admit that I was the better choice all along. After 3 days of deliberation and pressure from her own attorney, Linda submitted her resignation from the board. The resignation letter was brief, cold. It made no mention of me. It was framed as a decision to focus on family during this difficult time. Everyone knew the truth. She'd been forced out by her own failures and her son's crimes. I received the official offer. CEO of James Construction, full operational authority, a seat on the board. The salary was substantial, more than I made at my law firm. The responsibility was enormous, rebuilding a company that had been gutted by fraud while preserving jobs and reputation. I sat with the offer letter, thinking about my father, about the company he built, about the legacy that was almost destroyed. I picked up my phone and called Gerald. "I'll do it, but we're doing this my way." Marcus's sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Suffolk County Superior Court. I didn't plan to attend. I'd said everything I needed to say, and my presence would be interpreted as either gloating or support. Neither was accurate. But Patricia called and asked me to be there. "Carlos wants you there. He wants you to see that justice actually happened." So I went. I entered the courtroom and sat in the back, trying to be invisible. An ironic reversal of my family role. Marcus sat at the defense table with his attorney, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Carlos's monthly mortgage payment. Linda sat directly behind Marcus. Her face was rigid, controlled. She didn't acknowledge my presence, though she must have known I was there. The judge allowed victim impact statements. Carlos spoke first. He described the financial and emotional devastation of being fired before Christmas, his daughter leaving college, his wife working double shifts. His voice broke when he talked about losing faith in justice, about believing that wealthy people like Marcus never face consequences. "But I was wrong," Carlos said, looking at Marcus. "Sometimes the truth matters." Emma also provided a statement. She described Marcus's threats and the fear she'd lived with for months, the ethical violation of being pressured to falsify records, the damage to her professional reputation, the sleepless nights wondering if she'd be blamed for his crimes. "Sophie James saved my career," Emma said. I felt tears prick my eyes. She had every reason to stay silent, to protect her family. But she chose what was right. Marcus's attorney presented a statement emphasizing Marcus's remorse, his acceptance of responsibility, his commitment to making restitution. Marcus himself spoke briefly, reading from a prepared statement about his mistakes and his intention to rebuild his life. The words were correct, but I knew my brother well enough to hear the insincerity. He was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he'd done. Linda sat stone-faced throughout the proceedings, her hands clutched around a tissue she never used. I wondered what she was thinking, whether she was finally confronting Marcus's true character, whether she was blaming me for this outcome, whether she was capable of acknowledging her own role in enabling his behavior. I would never know. We'd never have that conversation. The judge delivered the sentence: 24 months in minimum security prison, 5 years supervised probation, full restitution of $1,247,000, permanent ban from corporate leadership, 500 hours of community service upon release. It was the plea deal exactly. Marcus had accepted it. The judge added a statement: "White-collar crime destroys lives just as surely as violent crime. You betrayed your employees, your clients, and your father's legacy. This sentence reflects the seriousness of those betrayals." Marcus nodded, accepting the sentence with apparent calm. But as the bailiff approached to process him into custody, his composure cracked. He was being remanded immediately. He looked back at Linda, his face suddenly young and frightened. "Mom?" Linda stood, reaching toward him, but the bailiff was already guiding him away. It was the first time I'd seen Marcus look genuinely vulnerable since we were children. Linda left the courtroom immediately, not looking at anyone. I watched my mother's rigid back disappear through the doors and felt an unexpected wave of pity. Linda had built her entire identity around Marcus's success. She'd sacrificed her relationship with her daughter to support his image, and now she had to face the reality that she'd chosen wrong. The pity didn't erase the hurt, but it complicated it. Carlos approached me in the courthouse hallway. "Thank you," he said simply. "I know what you gave up to help me. I know what it cost you." I shook my head. "You don't owe me thanks. You were right to fight back. You deserve justice." Carlos smiled sadly. "We both did." The statement hung between us, an acknowledgement that we'd both been victims of Marcus's choices, just in different ways. I walked out of the courthouse into bright autumn sunlight. My phone buzzed. "Daniel." "How did it go?" I typed back. "It's over. He got 2 years." Daniel's response came immediately. "How do you feel?" I paused, considering the question honestly. I typed, "free," and realized, as I sent it, that it was true. For the first time in my life, I was free of the weight of my family's dysfunction, free of the hope that they'd change, free of the need for their approval. The cost was enormous, but so was the freedom. My first day as CEO of James Construction was deliberately low-key. I arrived early, parked in a regular spot, not the reserved space Marcus had used, and entered through the main door with the employees. The receptionist did a double take. "Ms. James? I mean, we weren't expecting." I smiled. "I'm Sophie, just Sophie. And I'm here to work." I called an all-staff meeting for 9 in the morning, 73. Employees packed into the main conference room. Their faces showed curiosity, skepticism, and hope. I didn't use slides or formal presentation. I simply stood at the front of the room and talked. "I'm Robert James's daughter. Many of you worked with my father. You know the company he built. One based on quality, integrity, and treating people fairly." I paused, letting that settle. "My brother betrayed those values. He betrayed you. He betrayed our clients. And he betrayed my father's memory. I'm here to fix that, but I can't do it alone. I need your help, your honesty, and your commitment to rebuilding what was damaged." I made eye contact around the room. "I also need you to know, I'm not Marcus. I'm not here to cut corners or prioritize profit over people. We're going to do this right." My first official act was announcing Carlos's reinstatement as senior project manager, with full back pay and a formal apology from the company. Carlos stood, visibly emotional. The room erupted in applause. Several employees hugged him. Clearly, he'd been respected. His firing had been recognized as unjust. The moment set the tone. This was a company that valued good people and corrected its mistakes. I met with the accounting team to review the actual financial situation. Emma had been hired full-time and was part of the team now. It was worse than the audit had revealed. Marcus's fraud left the company with $800,000 in debt. 3 major contracts were in jeopardy due to quality issues. Our reputation was damaged and costing us new business. Several vendors had placed us on cash-only terms due to Marcus's payment delays. I developed a comprehensive restructuring plan. Renegotiate the outstanding debt, personally guarantee loans to restore vendor relationships, complete the troubled contracts at cost, absorbing losses to restore reputation, implement transparent financial controls. I took a salary cut to help with cash flow. I offered employees equity stakes in lieu of immediate bonuses. The plan was aggressive, but achievable. I personally visited every client with a troubled contract. I brought project files, quality reports, and a simple message. "We're fixing this, here's how, here's the timeline, and here's my personal guarantee." Most clients were skeptical initially, but my technical knowledge and obvious commitment won them over. By the end of the first month, 2 of the 3 troubled contracts were back on track. I implemented changes that seemed small but were symbolically huge. Open door policy, weekly staff meetings where anyone could raise concerns, transparent financial reporting, a formal ethics policy with whistleblower protections. Employees who'd been silenced under Marcus began speaking up about problems, suggesting improvements, taking ownership of their work. I moved into my father's old office. Marcus had redecorated it in expensive, impersonal style. I stripped out his additions and found, behind a built-in bookcase, my father's original desk. Solid oak, scratched and worn, with a drawer full of his handwritten notes. I kept the desk and placed on it a photo of my father at a job site, hard hat on, actually working. This was the legacy I was honoring. 3 months into my tenure, the company showed its first profitable month since my father's death. It was a small profit, barely $15,000. But it was real, earned through quality work and restored relationships. I shared the news at the staff meeting and announced profit-sharing bonuses for everyone. The room erupted in cheers. These people had believed in the company when they had no reason to. I was making sure they benefited from its recovery. A local business journal published a profile. James Construction, from Scandal to Redemption. The article detailed Marcus's crimes, my takeover, and the company's remarkable turnaround. It quoted several clients praising the new leadership, several employees describing the cultural transformation. The article mentioned that I was Robert James's daughter, but had been overlooked in the original succession planning, a detail that made the redemption story even more compelling. Despite the professional success, my personal life showed the scars of the family fracture. I hadn't spoken to Linda in 6 months. Marcus was in prison, and I had no plans to visit. Extended family members had mostly chosen sides. Most chose Linda and Marcus. My world was smaller now. Daniel, Emma, a few loyal friends, my colleagues. But it was authentic in a way my family relationships never were. I received a letter forwarded from the company's main office. The return address was the prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. I held the envelope unopened and felt the old pull of family obligation, the ingrained response to reach out, to forgive, to repair. But I also felt something new, the right to protect my own peace. I set the letter aside, unopened, and returned to work. Some bridges, once burned, don't need to be rebuilt. The letter from Marcus sat on my desk for 3 days. I saw it every morning when I arrived, every evening when I left. Daniel noticed but didn't comment. He'd learned to let me process in my own time. Emma asked about it during a financial meeting. "Are you going to read it?" I shrugged. "I don't know if I want to know what he has to say." On the 4th day, I stayed late at the office after everyone had left. I made tea, sat at my father's old desk, and opened the letter. My hands were steady. Whatever Marcus had written, it couldn't hurt me anymore. I'd built a life and identity separate from his opinion. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on prison stationery. It started with an apology. Sort of. Marcus wrote that he was sorry things ended this way, that he never meant for anyone to get hurt. I recognized the non-apology immediately. He was sorry about consequences, not actions. He wrote about prison being harder than expected, about having time to think. He claimed he was finally understanding what he'd done wrong. The letter's true purpose appeared in the 2nd page. Marcus asked me to advocate for early release, to write a letter to the parole board supporting his character, to help him rebuild his life after prison. He reminded me we were siblings, that family forgives, that our father would want us to move past this. The manipulation was transparent, but still effective at triggering guilt. The 3rd page contained something unexpected. Marcus admitted, for the first time, that he knew I was more qualified to run the company. "Dad talked about you taking over sometimes," Marcus wrote, "but Mom convinced him I needed it more, that you'd be fine without it. I knew it wasn't fair, but I wanted it anyway. I'm sorry I took something that should have been yours." I read the admission 3 times, feeling emotions I couldn't immediately name. It wasn't the apology I needed. It was years too late and motivated by self-interest. But it was also the first time Marcus had acknowledged the truth. He knew. They all knew. The invisibility wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. The confirmation was painful, but also validating. I wasn't imagining the injustice. I considered my options. I could write back, explaining why I wouldn't help him. I could visit him in prison for a final confrontation. I could send the letter to his parole officer as evidence of continued manipulation. Or I could do nothing. Let the silence speak for itself. After an hour of consideration, I chose the last option. I took the letter to the office shredder. I fed each page through slowly, watching Marcus's handwriting disappear into strips. It wasn't dramatic or angry. It was simply final. I didn't owe him a response. I didn't owe him my time, my emotional energy, or my forgiveness. I owed him nothing, and the freedom in that realization was profound. That night, I told Daniel about the letter and my decision not to respond. "Do you think I'm being cruel?" I asked. Daniel considered carefully. "I think you're being self-protective. Marcus wants something from you. Absolution, assistance, attention. You don't have to give it to him. Forgiveness isn't mandatory, especially when it's not earned." I'd been seeing a therapist since the family fracture, processing the grief of losing my family of origin, while simultaneously feeling relief at their absence. My therapist asked, "What would responding to Marcus give you?" I thought about it. Nothing. It would give him hope that I might eventually help him, which would give him power over my peace. Not responding is the boundary. I learned through Emma that Linda had been visiting Marcus regularly, bringing him money for commissary, hiring lawyers to appeal his sentence. Linda had apparently told family members that I'd abandoned Marcus in his time of need. The narrative hadn't changed. I was still the bad daughter. Marcus still the victim. The consistency was almost comforting. It confirmed I'd made the right choice. 2 weeks after shredding the letter, I received another envelope from the prison. This time I didn't even open it. I wrote "Return to sender" on the envelope and dropped it in the outgoing mail. As I walked back to my office, I felt something settle inside me. A final release of obligation. Marcus could write 100 letters. I didn't have to read them. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. And I was the one in control now. It had been 1 year since I took over James Construction. The company hadn't just survived, it had thrived. Revenues up 40%, 15 new employees hired, 3 major contracts won, industry awards for quality and ethical business practices. I stood at the job site of our largest project, a sustainable housing development, and watched my team work with the precision and pride my father had valued. I organized a company anniversary celebration, not celebrating my takeover, but commemorating my father's founding of the company 40 years ago. I invited all current employees, several retirees who'd worked with Robert, key clients and vendors. Carlos gave a speech about my father's integrity and how the company had returned to those values. The event was covered by local media as a business success story. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on the year. I'd lost my mother, my brother, and most of my extended family, but I'd gained something more valuable: myself. I'd built a professional reputation based on my own merit, created a company culture that reflected my values, established relationships based on authenticity rather than obligation. I received a letter, not from Marcus this time, but from my father's sister, Aunt Catherine. She'd sided with Linda after the trial. The letter was brief. "I was wrong about you. I've been watching what you've done with the company, and I understand now. Robert would be proud. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. I cried reading it, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen. I learned through Emma that Linda had sold her house and moved to Florida, closer to Marcus's prison. She'd apparently told people she couldn't stay in Boston with all the shame. The move was framed as my fault. If I'd helped Marcus, none of this would have happened. I felt a pang of sadness for my mother, trapped in a narrative that prevented growth. But I didn't feel responsible for Linda's choices anymore. Daniel and I got married in a small ceremony. Just 20 people, mostly friends and colleagues. Emma was my maid of honor. Gerald walked me down the aisle, standing in for the father who never quite saw me clearly, but whose legacy I was honoring. The ceremony was simple, joyful, completely free of family drama. I realized this was what peace felt like. I was invited to speak at a business ethics conference about corporate culture and accountability. I told my story carefully, without naming Marcus or Linda, but honestly about favoritism, fraud, and the courage required to choose integrity over family loyalty. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of family businesses destroyed by nepotism and enabled dysfunction. In therapy, my therapist asked, "Do you still feel like the invisible daughter?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I feel like the daughter who chose to be visible to the people who matter. I'm not invisible. I was just looking for validation in the wrong places." The therapist smiled. "That's significant growth. Emma told me that Marcus was up for parole review in 6 months. He's apparently been a model prisoner," she said. "His lawyer thinks he'll get early release." I felt no anxiety at the news. "Okay," I said simply. Emma looked surprised. "That's it? You're not worried he'll come back and cause problems?" I shook my head. "He has no power over me anymore. Whatever he does next is his choice. My life isn't defined by his presence or absence. I used to think family was supposed to be your safe place, your unconditional support, your foundation, and maybe for some people it is. But I learned that family, real family, isn't about blood. It's about people who see you, value you, and choose you every day. I found my family in Daniel, in Emma, in colleagues who became friends, in a community built on mutual respect rather than obligation. If you've been the invisible one in your family, if you've sacrificed yourself trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given, I want you to know you're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by people who refuse to see it, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people who make you feel small and build a life with people who help you feel whole. If this story resonated with you, if you found your own strength in leaving behind what doesn't serve you, I'd be honored if you'd like and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, peace isn't found in getting the family you deserved. It's found in building the life you deserve, with or without them. James' construction continued to grow. I implemented a formal succession plan, not based on family relationships, but on competence and shared values. Carlos was being groomed for a leadership position. Emma was now CFO. The company had become what Robert intended, a legacy of quality work and ethical business practices, sustained by people who cared about something bigger than themselves. I stood in my father's old office, now fully mine, looking at the photo of him at the job site. I didn't feel his absence as sharply anymore. Instead, I felt his presence in the work I did, the standards I maintained, the people I led. I wasn't the daughter he acknowledged, but I'd become the leader he would have respected. And that, I realized, was enough. I closed my laptop, turned off the office lights, and headed home to Daniel. As I locked the door behind me, I thought about everything that had happened. I'd spent 34 years trying to earn a place in a family that didn't want me. Now I'd built a family that chose me every day. That wasn't revenge. That was peace. I walked to my car, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, authentically free. I'm 36 now. James Construction is in its third year under my leadership. The company has doubled its workforce, expanded into sustainable building practices, and become a case study in ethical business transformation. I've been profiled in national business publications, invited to serve on boards of industry organizations. I've built something that's entirely mine. Marcus was released from prison 4 months ago after serving 18 months of his sentence. I know this only because Emma mentioned it in passing. Marcus hasn't contacted me directly. Whether out of respect for my boundaries or because he knows I won't respond, I don't know. And I don't care. I heard through family channels that he's working in sales for a commercial real estate company, living in a small apartment, slowly rebuilding his life. Linda hasn't contacted me in 2 years. I've heard that she returned from Florida and lives in a modest condo in the suburbs, supported partly by her Social Security and partly by Marcus's financial assistance. The family narrative apparently still casts me as the villain, but I've stopped caring about that narrative. The people who matter know the truth. I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop near the company office. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the sentencing. Marcus looked older, thinner, less polished. He saw me and froze, clearly debating whether to approach. I made the decision for him. I nodded acknowledgement, but didn't approach. Marcus nodded back, and we each returned to our separate lives. The moment was anticlimactic, which was exactly right. Daniel and I are expecting our first child, a daughter. We've already decided she'll be named Catherine, after my aunt, who apologized and has since rebuilt a relationship with me. The baby will grow up knowing her grandfather's legacy through stories and the company he built. But she'll be raised in a family that values her inherently, not for what she achieves or how she serves others. I established the Robert James Scholarship Fund. It provides financial support for children of construction workers to attend college, regardless of whether they choose construction careers. The scholarship honors my father's actual values: education, hard work, and opportunity, rather than the nepotistic favoritism that characterized the succession after his death. Carlos serves on the scholarship committee. My therapist told me I'd reached a point where I no longer needed regular sessions. "You've done the work," she said. "You've processed the grief, established boundaries, built a healthy life. You know how to recognize dysfunction and protect yourself from it. That's not to say you won't have hard days, but you have the tools now." I felt both proud and slightly scared. Therapy had been my safe space for processing, but I also knew it was time. I sit in my office late one evening, reviewing plans for the company's expansion. I think about the girl I was at that New Year's dinner 2 years ago, sitting at the table, hearing Marcus declare I wasn't real family, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility. That girl is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her worth, who built a company and a life based on her values, who chose peace over approval. I realized that the revenge I took wasn't against Marcus or Linda. It was against the version of myself who accepted invisibility. The revenge was becoming visible on my own terms, building success that couldn't be dismissed or minimized, creating a legacy that would outlast the family dysfunction. Marcus went to prison and is now rebuilding. Linda is isolated, but I'm thriving. And that, the living well, the building something real, the choosing myself, that is the ultimate revenge. I turn off my computer and head home. Tomorrow, I have a doctor's appointment for the baby, a meeting with a major new client, dinner with Emma and her new girlfriend. My life is full, complicated, and entirely mine. I don't think about Marcus or Linda anymore. Not with anger, not with longing, not with anything. They're simply people I used to know, people who taught me what I didn't want to become. And in the end, that lesson was the most valuable gift they could have given me. As I drive home, I pass the cemetery where my father is buried. On impulse, I pull in and walk to his grave. I haven't visited in over a year, not out of anger, but because I've made my peace. I stand there in the fading light and say out loud, "I did it, Dad. I saved your company. I did it right." I don't wait for a response or a sign. I simply say what I needed to say and walk away. Behind me, the sun sets on the James family drama. Ahead of me, the lights of my real life shine bright and welcoming. The life I built, the life I chose, the life where I'm finally completely visible. I drive toward them, and I don't look back.